Здравствуйте, дорогие зрители! Меня зовут Лариса, я продюсер Института Стрелка. Спасибо всем, кто смотрит нас в Ютубе, в Фейсбуке, ВКонтакте и собирается провести с нами ближайший час. Я бы хотела представить нашего первого спикера публичной программы «Стрелка 2020 Live». Это Саша Самошина, заместитель руководителя операционного отдела Jet Propulsion Lab в NASA. Она прочитает лекцию о том, как AR-технологии используются для решения научных задач и проектирования космических кораблей. После лекции будет серия Q&A с Сашей, так что, пожалуйста, задавайте свои вопросы в комментариях под постом трансляции на любом языке или в чате в Ютубе. Мы их соберем во время эфира и передадим Саше. Также задавайте вопросы во время самой сессии, мы их оперативно передадим. Лекция пройдет на английском языке с переводом на русский. Вы можете переключить язык на Ютубе, для этого нужно нажать «Сменить ракурс» в правом нижнем углу и выбрать язык. Смотреть с русской дорожкой можно на русскоязычном Фейсбуке и ВКонтакте Института Стрелка и на английском на языке Стрелка Института в Фейсбуке. Я бы хотела сказать большое спасибо посольству США в Москве, при чьей поддержке мы проводим эту лекцию. И больше не задерживаю эфир и передаю слово Саше.
Спасибо большое, Лариса. Здравствуйте. Лекции будут по-английски, но в конце, когда будут вопросы, я могу отвечать по-английски или по-русски. Хорошо, так и начинаем. Hello. My name is Sasha Samochina, and today I will be giving a lecture entitled Floating in Space. I am the Deputy Manager of the Operations Lab at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And today I will be telling you about my career path and journey of how I got to this place in my job, as well as telling you a little bit about what inspires me about art and science. And then I will tell you more about augmented reality and the work that I'm doing currently in the Ops Lab at JPL. I'm going to say JPL, which also stands for Jet Propulsion Laboratory. It is a shorter way to say it. So a question that I've always had in my mind growing up was, how do you combine art and science? Oftentimes, the answer is the shruggy emoji, because there's not really a clear path, or at least there wasn't for me when I was in school, to truly understand how to get in between these two disciplines. Here's a photo of me when I was a little kid, classically doing something that I like wearing a very fancy dress and playing a computer game. So in this time, I was very interested in art, music, technology, and science. And in early on school, it was really hard to sort of decide what to choose. So I kind of went with both, and I want to kind of take you on that beginning journey. We start the journey at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. That's where I went to university. It's a really good multidisciplinary school that kind of brings out the idea of conceptual work and thinking outside of a normal way of thinking. There I majored in film, video, and new media. And this program, now we go back one. There's a little bit of a lag, sorry about that. I majored in film, video, and new media, which combine kind of new ways of thinking about how to create stories with film and video, and new media, which at that point just simply meant the internet. And this is my favorite gifs of what the internet feels like to me. Very much like a hedgehog surfing in a browser window and kittens and computers. So this gave me the ability to kind of learn some technical programming alongside a very art disciplined practice. And that led me to kind of my first career, which was at the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago. This museum is somewhere that I started interning when I was really just in my second year of university. And my first assignment was to make an animation for Bolivian deforestation, which led me to kind of understand data visualization. I was asked to create an animation in Flash, and I said, sure, I know Flash, and I did not know how to use Flash. And I had never used data visualization, but since it was my second year in college, I took the leap. These are some pictures of things that I participated in, anywhere from photographing all of the collections at the museum, to being in a helicopter telling a story about saving land in Chicago. And on the right, on the bottom there, you'll see Luba, who you might be familiar with, a woolly mammoth that is the most preserved mammoth ever found. She died about 41,800 years ago, and she was discovered by the Nanette tribe in the Yamal Peninsula. So I got to translate for this courier of the mammoth. And that led me to kind of the biggest project that I did at the field, which was called Restoring Earth. It's a permanent hall, so if you're ever in Chicago, you should go visit. It was based on this idea of rapid inventory programs, which were invented at the Field Museum. And this was a program where about several scientists came into a remote place in the Amazon, and they were able to quickly survey the land that was being threatened by either deforestation of lumber, big industry of any sort. So they were able to both save civilizations of people that were understudied, but they were also able to take these surveys of different kinds of animals and flora that were in the region. So by the end of my career there, when we opened Restoring Earth, we had saved about 28 million acres of land in the Amazon, and we had created this exhibit to talk about it. And since then, there have even been more acres saved. So it was really the first time that in my mind, this idea of connecting media and connecting communication came through to actually save land. We were also able to open the third biggest park in Peru called Cordillera Azul. So that's a story that I like to tell. It was a wonderful team to work with, from the exhibits people through the scientists. It was incredibly interesting. So I think that led me to kind of think about how everything is reality. This is one of my favorite quotes from Robert Irwin and his book, In Seeing is Forgetting the Name of the Thing That One Sees. So I threw this GIF of Ceres in here to kind of connect the dots on how I went from somewhere like the field to somewhere like NASA. I actually had several jobs in between those jobs, but I want to get to what I do now. So I guess this quote is really special to me because it kind of tells me that everything is reality. So you don't always have to execute ideas perfectly. And my path to NASA was not very usual, as some would say. So I think that let's get into that path. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history of NASA and JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So let that cosmic journey begin here. I think one of the best intersectionalities of art and science for me in the very beginning, even as a younger person learning about space, was the Voyager spacecraft. So Voyager is a 2 spacecraft mission, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. They both launched in 1977. So that is when the first Star Wars came out, if that gives you any sort of understanding of where technology was at that point. And on board of both Voyagers, there was the Golden Record, which was something Carl Sagan made, who was in our last slide. And it was supposed to tell the world, be basically a letter to any being that would find this spacecraft, because its mission was to go outside of our solar system. So if anything were to ever find it, they would know that we're a small place called Earth, and this is what we sound like, and this is the music that we love. So for me, that was one of the most powerful kind of combinations of taking something so beautiful and artistic and putting it on this insanely amazing piece of equipment that both of them are still running. And Voyager 1 is now the farthest spacecraft or human-made thing away from our Earth. So with this beautiful love letter on it. So I think about it going out there all the time, and it still relays signals back. But let me explain to you how all of that happens. So there is a little bit of a history lesson here. So finally, here we come to NASA. And before I can really explain my job now, I want to explain to you why the Jet Propulsion Laboratory is special. So this is what the place I work looks like. So this is JPL. It's in the center of a town in Pasadena, California. So it's very warm here, as you can see, lots of sun. So the term jet was originally used, not rocket, because rocket seemed too science fiction-y. JPL was actually formed in the 1930s and is part of the California Institute of Technology. So all of us are actually not government workers. We work for the California Institute of Technology. So we're very much contractors, and we're the only NASA center that's like that. We're one of 10 NASA centers scattered around the United States, and I'll talk a little bit more about a few of other centers in a second. So this whole place was started because of an accidental explosion that happened on the Caltech, or California Institute of Technology's campus, by the people that began JPL. So it was about a group of 7 guys that were trying to make crazy experiments, and this accidental explosion caused the head of Caltech at that time, Theodore von Karman, to say, "Why don't you please go a little bit further away into the desert or the arroyo, and you can do your experiments there." So JPL formed in 14 years before NASA, and NASA became an agency in 1958, but not without the help of JPL. So when we look at our next slide here, we'll see one of my favorite photos. This is in the beginnings of JPL. In the beginning, JPL was actually sponsored by the US Army to develop technology for corporal and sergeant missile systems. So they did the first ballistic missile testing. They did the first kind of Army experiments. And this is an example of a missile test that's happening. I would like you to try and guess which one of these people works at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I don't think it's too much of a challenge. So in this picture, you can see all of the military people looking in one direction, and this shirtless Jet Propulsion Laboratory employee, and one of the first people to start thinking about rockets, looking in the other direction. And the reason for this is because he's looking, or the Army people are looking at where the rocket is supposed to land, and he's looking at, excuse me, they're looking at where the rocket is taking off from, and he is looking at where the rocket is going to land. So that in itself is a very beautiful metaphor for me about how exactly forward-thinking the beginning of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory is, and where it is now in terms of how much we explore. So speaking of Explorer 1 was built at JPL. It was in response to Sputnik. The difference in Explorer 1 being that it actually did science. So it had instruments on it to detect certain things, and it actually found the Van Allen radiation belts. I don't take sides on Sputnik versus Explorer 1. They both did different things. So don't ask me that question. So after Explorer 1, JPL, that was in 1958 when NASA formed, and we actually became a big center, obviously. And so in the left here, you see 2 different views of our mission control. One from the 60s and one from current day. So on the right, you see what our mission control center looks like now. And you might be asking yourself, what is mission control? So we are home to the place that actually tracks any robotic mission that's flying in space. So American or not, we are able to communicate with all of space. Our former director, Dr. Charles Alachi, calls our mission control the center of the universe. And that's because he was giving a tour once and realized, hey, we're talking to Saturn, we're talking to Jupiter, we're talking to, orbiters going around Earth. We're really the center of the universe in terms of communication. And so that wonderful poetic verse was used to name our center, our mission control. And so how does mission control work? So here is a GIF of an antenna, which is one of a fleet of 3 different locations that we have called the Deep Space Network. So the Deep Space Network is the way that we communicate with all of our flying missions. So NASA has an international array of giant radio antennas that supports interplanetary spacecraft missions, plus a few that orbit Earth. So it provides radar and radio astronomy observations that improve the understanding of our solar system. These arrays are actually located in 3 places on Earth, one in Goldstone here near Barstow, California, one near Madrid, Spain, and one near Canberra, Australia. And they're approximately 120 degrees apart in longitude so that they will never lose signal with anything that's flying in space. And that includes Voyager, the mission that I talked about earlier. To connect the dots about my personal journey with mission control and the Deep Space Network, I like myself and spacecraft operations engineer Dave Duty, who also is a person that's art-minded and a really, truly amazing man. And during Cassini's grand finale, which I'll explain a little bit in a few minutes, I was actually able to send the first command sequence with him to start the grand finale, which I will tell you about in a second. So this was a really special moment of him explaining to me how exactly we were going to send the signal, when it was supposed to get there, and how it was the first of 3 sets of signals. So that was a very special work day for me. Okay, but Jet Propulsion Laboratory is mainly known for our robotic missions. So we do focus on robotic missions only. We don't focus on human spaceflight, but we do in some senses with technology, which I'll tell you later as well. You might be familiar with this robot, you might not. This is the Curiosity robot, Rover, excuse me, and it's one of our most famous missions. It's also known in a longer way called the Mars Science Laboratory. So it launched on November 26, 2011 to Mars and landed successfully in Gale Crater on Mars on August 6, 2012. The overall objective of this rover was to investigate the Mars habitability and studying its climate and geology, which this rover did very successfully, and she is still roving up there today. So it was a 90-day mission that lasted, now this long. She's already, it's 2020. She landed in 2012. That's amazing. So this mission's main objective was to find ancient rivers or lakes or signs of them, signs of ancient rivers and lakes on Mars. And she successfully did that. But the main thing about her is the data that she was able to provide us with, and how she did that. So when I first started at JPL, the very first kind of thing I was interested in was these sort of panoramic photos that we were releasing of the rover. The rover has 17 cameras, and this allows her to both take selfies and full panoramas. So she can either survey just herself, so we can see what everything looks like to see how she's doing up there. A lot more of the time she does a survey of the world around her, so we scientists can do their job kind of inspecting and looking at things. So the first thing that I thought about when thinking about immersive technologies, which were just coming out in 2016, exactly when this photo was released. In February 2016, we got this full panorama that we actually give to the public in this way. I should mention that at JPL and at NASA, we have this charter that asks for the widest dissemination of information concerning its activities and the results thereof, which means we need to tell people what our science and robotic missions, everything under the sun of NASA, do immediately after it happens. And the communications department is where I started, and the communications department really did an amazing job of this. So from that picture that I showed you shown in the panoramic view in February 2016, I was able to make this 360 video. This might be a little laggy for everyone, but I'll give a link later to show. But this is the Curiosity rover at Namib Dune. And Namib Dune is a giant dune that, we would usually show in that blown out view, but now we were actually able to show the whole 360 panorama of Curiosity's view. So you were basically standing in her wheels, as I like to say. So for me, I was the first person to compile this together for social media when the 360 API or application program interface first came out. So it came out on Facebook and YouTube, and we were able to share this new way of looking at data with the whole entire world. And this was a big splash when it first came out, and the team that worked around and with me were super helpful. And so this kind of changed the way in which we were able to communicate really easily with our public and with both the United States and the world. So let's see here. So I'm going to take you through a couple more examples of things we did. It's a little bit easier to see the GIFs, so I'll just show that. So this is Juno. Juno arrived at Jupiter on July 2016. It took 5 years to get there. It was actually a July 4th event. So United States really likes their holidays. So we planned it somehow to be there on July 4th, our Independence Day in America. So Jupiter is a very intense planet. I call it the Mordor of planets. If you are a Lord of the Rings fan, you'll get what I mean. This fully robotic mission now has been studying Jupiter since 2016, closer than any spacecraft before. So before it had this big insertion into the orbit of Jupiter, we wanted to put our audience right next to the actual planet. So in this GIF, you see a 360 pan of both Juno and the planet, which shows you the data that we used to have. And that data from Jupiter is updated now that Juno has been up there for as long as it has, for 4 years, and being able to survey the planet. We also were able to take our audience inside the spacecraft. So in one of the parts of the video, you're actually able to travel inside of the CAD model or the computer-aided design model of the spacecraft and see all of the different instruments we have on there, but also see 3 Lego minifigures. So we say we don't have human spaceflight, but in this case, we actually took 3 little travelers to Jupiter. We took Galileo, Juno, and Jupiter, and they were Lego minifigures specifically made out of a specific material so that we could have a little nod to the first astronomer that saw Jupiter, and kind of the other players that helped this planet to become what it is, and for us to be able to study it in the way that we did and are still doing. So I had talked a little bit about Cassini.
After exploring Saturn for over 13 years,
and I'll let you all
NASA's
watch
Cassini
this
spacecraft
as I
begins
pan
its
around.
final chapter. In this visualization, you're traveling with Cassini at over 70,000 miles an hour as it makes one of its 22 planned dives through the unexplored space between Saturn and its rings. Looking toward the planet, Cassini will see Saturn's cloud tops 10 times closer than ever before. Looking out from the planet, the spacecraft will scan Saturn's icy rings in detail. Look closely and you'll see embedded moons. The distant sunbeams from beyond the rings as you travel along. This daring new mission will give us the closest views yet. The first taste of Saturn's atmosphere, and maybe the mission's best science yet. This is Cassini's grand finale.
All right, so for a better playback of those, you can actually go to this bit.ly that I created. And on this link, you can actually take all of the 360s that every center has made, including the 9 that I helped produce, download them and do whatever you want with them. In terms of an art project, we have a lot of planetariums that actually take these and project them on their domes. So these are free assets for you to take. And I should mention that's sort of the way that NASA does the releases of any of our content. So a lot of it's in the public domain. Mostly all of it is in the public domain. So we really want you to go and take the assets that you need and use them in the way that you want without having to pay any fees or anything like that. robotic exploration is to be shared. And so we really, really want to have that experience be something that everyone can take home with them. And I'll have this link up at the end as well. So this takes us to the next chapter of my JPL experience, and that is at the Ops Lab where I currently work. So the Ops Lab is sort of, you can think about it like a startup within the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. We are a bunch of designers and developers working on software to help scientists and engineers transform their mission operations. So we're just trying to make their life a little easier through creating software. Here are an example of some of the things that we work on, and I'm actually going to take you on a journey through all of the projects and explain more with video and a little bit of cool examples. So the first tool I want to talk about is for Mars. So remember I showed you Mars Curiosity, or the Mars Science Laboratory, takes photos on Mars. And I was able to create 360 videos out of those when I was in the communications department. Moving over to more software again in my career, I realized that that the Ops Lab was very cool because of the things that they did with this data that were not done with just a 360. So I became very, very interested in this idea of how do I get on the back end of software immersion. So on the left of your screen, you see ASTRO, or the Advanced Science Targeting Tool for Robotic Operations. And that is the science targeting tool for the Mars 2020 mission. And on the right is the first thing we made at the Ops Lab that was completely augmented reality, called Onsite. So what these tools actually do, and I'll talk about Onsite first, but we're actually able to take data from Mars, combine it into orbital data, and use augmented reality to have geologists walk on the surface of Mars, just as they would walk on the surface of Earth. And I do want to mention Astro because it's a tool that's being built right now. That team is a wonderful team in my lab. This is something that is going to be used for the Perseverance mission, which is our next rover mission that is launching this July and landing in February of 2021. So please keep your eyes open for that launch and the landing in February, which is going to be very exciting. This rover called Perseverance has a Mars helicopter on it, and it will be the first rover to actually cache samples for later pickup and return to Earth. So it's going to take what Curiosity did and take it to the next level. It's a very, very exciting tool and very exciting mission. But let's talk about how it started, which is Onsite. So this is the way that geologists used to look at 3D images. It's your basic cyan, magenta look, so you can put on your glasses and see the depth. A really good way of doing it in earlier times, and I'm still a huge fan, but there are better ways to combine data with the software that we have. So in 2013, I was not part of the Ops Lab, but the wonderful team that was, and some of them are still there. In 2013, the JPL Ops Lab started studying to see what an actual VR, or virtual reality headset, on the head of a geologist looking at Mars data would do. Would they be able to see what they wanted better? Would it give better context to what they were looking at? And from the studies that we did, it was a resounding yes. Yes, being immersed for a geologist is super helpful. So that's where Onsite came into play. Onsite allows for scientists to work on Mars from their offices. So using the HoloLens tool, and I'll play with this in a second, but let's go back one slide. Using the HoloLens, which this young man is wearing in this picture, you're able to collaboratively meet on Mars in different locations or in the same location and study different points in 3D. We're using the Microsoft HoloLens, which is an augmented reality holographic tool. So you're actually overlaying holograms onto the real world. You can see the world around you. You can see people working with you. You can also see these avatars of people in other places. And so you can be a scientist in France, talking to a scientist in Pasadena, talking to a scientist, in Maryland, all at the same place on Mars. And so we sort of revolutionized the way that that technology works. And just to show you, oh, this isn't a 360. So just to show you what the terrain that we create actually looks like. It's a very high def terrain. This is a combination of Mars Science Laboratory data from the Curiosity rover and orbital data put together into a 3D mesh. So the very talented people I work with in the ops lab actually created a pipeline that's able to pull all of this data down and automatically create these wonderful terrains. So yeah, it's very much a sight to see. When you first see it in augmented reality, you almost can't believe your eyes that you're standing on the surface of Mars. Um, and it is sort of magical in a lot of ways, but the magic comes from extremely hard work and really, really just incredible software design. So using this as an example, we went and tried to, or we actually, oh, pardon me, let's go back. We actually helped to see the first desiccation cracks or signs of desiccation cracks, which had been found on Mars, but not in this certain way. So the desiccation cracks or mud cracks that were seen, which look like this, were first viewed in the on-site experience. And then the rover team, along with the science team, were able to investigate and look at this site more. So from this augmented reality experience, we were actually able to connect a real scientific finding, which was a huge win for us and validated the fact that this technology, although with some problems, sometimes it can still really help to do things that we don't know how to do otherwise at this time. And this is what some of the sessions look like in Onsite. So we call them Meet on Mars. And these are avatars meeting virtually, just like you would meet on Earth, and looking at different sites, putting down markers, measuring things, drawing, and being able to have full scientific discussions in augmented reality. So I think that there were a lot of learning lessons here. I think without the help of our wonderful user experience design team, specifically, looking and seeing how people were using the product and making it better, most of these Meet on Mars wouldn't be as successful as they were. So it took some kind of hand holding and saying, hey, let's do this from our end to start people getting interested, because the technology is new. And back then, this is, several years ago, it was completely new. Onsite was actually the first application to be released for the Microsoft HoloLens. And so we worked really closely in collaboration with the company to make this a really useful and, nicely working product. So we always have to have a companion piece. As I said in the charter, we want to share our findings with the world. So we made this experience later on. Again, I wasn't directly part of it. So our talented team was able to take our on-site experience and port it to this experience called Destination Mars. So it's the museum version of on-site. And it's a guided tour of Mars led by a holographic video capture of Buzz Aldrin, the astronaut, which is pretty crazy. And then JPL rover driver Arissa Hines also takes you through how the Curiosity rover works. This exhibition ran for just over 3 months at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex, which is in Florida. And more than 28,000 visitors experienced this exhibit using the HoloLens and actually being able to walk on Mars. And we found that to be a very, very, very kind of successful run, but it still wasn't reaching enough people. This is in one museum and one place. So we created Access Mars, which is a web VR experience made together with Google Creative Labs. So if you go to accessmars.com today, you'll be able to rove Mars just like the Curiosity rover, or just like a geologist. So on accessmars.com, you'll be able to be transported to several sites on Mars that Curiosity has looked at, and you're able to explore in the same way that our scientists do. So I encourage you to do this specifically in these times. I think it's a good educational experience for both children and adults, and you'll get to learn a little bit more of things that I can't tell you today about why certain images look like they do, or why certain data are interpreted in the way that they are. So all right, so we talked through a little bit of our scientific experiences. So let's go through engineering. We have a project called Protospace, which is a CAD visualization project. And as I said, CAD stands for Computer Aided Design. Computer Aided Design is a way in which, actually, let me pause this for a second. I was going to turn the volume down on this. Oh, you know what? Let's just watch this video. I think it might be more helpful. Let's do this.
Every stage in the engineering life cycle requires fast and simple visualization of 3D models. Protospace takes 3D models out of the 2D plane and into the real world at full scale. The Protospace web portal is used to simplify CAD files, preparing them to be used in an immersive headset, allowing for more flexibility than a desktop workstation. Users simply upload their CAD files to the web portal, reducing the model's complexity without losing essential fidelity. Protospace is meant to be used by many people at one time. In a multi-user session, every participant can see the model in the same space and interact with it using a number of tools. Users can change position, rotate, create cross-sections, scale, and play animations, all in real time. These tools create an immersive and collaborative workspace. Protospace allows overlays of 3D models with technical components, helping technicians to develop assembly steps. NASA astronauts perform complex procedures on board the International Space Station. In the future, tools like Protospace could help in executing those procedures. Protospace brings 3D designs into the world, solving problems before they're real.
So, as you saw there, this is a collaborative visualization tool for creating spacecraft. So, you're actually building your spacecraft before you machine any part of it. You can work at scale, blend the virtual and the physical, and easily interact with any model. So people are using it in a lot of different kinds of ways. We're using it to communicate simple spatial problems like my hand won't fit here when I'm actually putting this together in the clean room. We're practicing installations, meaning that engineers actually bring in their real tools. In the center picture there, that's someone working virtually on a piece of their spacecraft with actual tools that they used to build it to see if the tools fit properly. And then we also execute procedures, which is something that you saw in the astronaut portion of that video at the end. So with Protospace, we're able to bring 3D designs into the world and solve problems very much before they become real. And in the same way, as you saw, we're able to show different people remotely how to make procedures work. So here we have Scott Kelly, who spent a year on the International Space Station wearing a HoloLens with a former version of Protospace loaded onto it. And he's able to actually see the procedure that he needs to do overlaid on actual hardware. So we're able to take this hardware and software and put it together, and again, have this remote collaboration capability where he's able to work and have a remote assistance person in mission control. And in the same way that in Protospace, you're able to build a spacecraft virtually in the same room or in different rooms as someone. So you don't have to be in the same location. So with crew and human spaceflight, we empower crew with assistance when and where they need it. And to show an example of the latest work we're doing with this procedure assistance, with NASA Extreme Environment Mission Operations. And this is short. The acronym is Nemo, which is very nice. So last summer, the Protospace team went to the Aquarius Habitat, which you see in the lower left-hand corner. The Aquarius Habitat is the only underwater habitat in the world that helps train astronauts and scientists. So for this mission, we were doing a lunar analog mission, pretending that the aquanauts, so that's aquatic astronauts and scientists, were actually on a real moon mission. And so we do this to test technology. On this mission, we had 2 astronauts, 2 scientists, and 2 habtechs that were basically helping them to train and understand things. And on the top right, you see one of the scientists, Chilla, actually using Protospace with procedure assistance to perform a daily task. And on the right, you have a little clue in as to what she's seeing. You lock into the actual instructions. You're able to have attention directors take you through the process, and you're also seeing all of your notes digitally. So it really helps in terms of getting through movements much faster. And it's a lot more quick than doing things in on just paper. And so we just published a paper on this for IEEE, which I can point to maybe. And so we're doing research again to validate that this is a tool that will be useful specifically as hardware becomes more and more distinguished and better functioning in the future. So again, we always have to have a companion tool that we can share with the public, and we love to do that. So we created Spacecraft AR, which you can download today, and it's a tool which lets you collaboratively start sessions with your friends and neighbors and family, and you're able to see full-scale spacecraft in the comfort of your living room. So we have several different missions that you can explore. We have animations in those missions. So I really encourage you to kind of take a break maybe from space for a second after this lecture, or immediately download the tool so you can have Mars Curiosity sitting and listening to this lecture with you. You can also take a selfie with the robot, which is really nice. So I look forward to seeing those posts on social media. See? Let's go back one. Okay, so, pardon me. I'm too fast on them, too fast on the clicking. I think it's to take it back to right now, I thought I would share this video because currently in this pandemic, we are all, stuck in our homes and trying to follow the rules that we were being told. And it always kind of dawned on me, how do you help? How do I help? People have been making masks, people have been delivering food, and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory decided to help in a big way to design a ventilator. So 2 different models of ventilator that are going to be able to be mass produced for consumption by any country. So I'm going to play through this video that will be much more eloquent in explaining how it all goes together. And then I will come back in a second. So here we go.
We are designing an easy and rapidly mass manufacturable ventilator device, and it is a crazy project.
This crisis is unprecedented in our lives and requires precedented action.
I'm so amped up. I mean, it really, the adrenaline rush, it's exciting, but it's exhausting. And I think we all just want to do everything we can to try to help.
Are you ready?
Yeah. Oh, very cool. That's awesome.
I would say the biggest personal challenges that I have myself is I don't have time to sleep.
I think what JPL brings to the table is extraordinary talent. It also brings to the table tremendous innovation. The third thing it brings to the table is tremendous focus. The other thing that I felt, I see it in our team, and that is a call to duty. I have this talent, I'm an engineer or a scientist, I can do something.
We have the potential to save human lives, people that we might know, our neighbors, our families. And that intensity, amazing. It's amazing. And as stressful as this has been for everybody in the last couple of weeks, not one of us can stop.
So since that video has been released, we actually got the approval from the FDA. So it's on to the next steps. There are certain members of our lab that are part of helping in this project. And, you know, it's just been very wonderful to be part of something big like this and to be part of a place that helps. And I think that really does speak about what JPL cares about and how we can take all of these skills that we have and put them onto something that's needed. So I'm very proud of this team for coming together and making this happen. If you want to learn more information, that video has a link. So if you know of anyone or a manufacturing place that wants to license a ventilator, I believe you can still sign up. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that you still can. I might edit that out. I might edit that later and say that it's not available, but I'm pretty sure you can still sign up. So to kind of come to a close, I think in the beginning of this, I was talking about the idea of art and science and this ability to work in both the design process and flight missions and transforming the way that scientists and engineers solve problems. And for me, that also part of it is through the people that I see and work with every day, just feeling inspired by the surroundings that I'm in and understanding that if I only knew that art and science had a better connection and would be this part of my career, I would have probably tried to, I actually wouldn't have changed any part of my path, but I just think it's really important to try and connect the dots between the things that happened in the past with NASA and with JPL, and then feeling like a new chapter and a new face to that story. So I really want to sort of, in my career now and to follow, to bridge this gap between what happened in history and put a more realistic look on how science and engineering can be combined today by so many interesting and diverse people. And I think with the ventilator project, that shows a lot of movement. So before, I used to have this slide that said the intersectionality of art and science is you, but I really think that at this point in this day and age, it is us together. So understanding each other, communicating with each other, and being able to sort of be the change that we want to see. So with that, I encourage you to follow, there's that Planetarium 360 link that I had posted with all of the 360s on it. I encourage you to check out things on the YouTube page for NASA. Follow me personally if you want. I very much like to communicate, and I will answer your questions and continue this conversation offline. For my personal site, you can go to cloudsasha.com to see a deeper dive into some of the content I showed today. And jpl.nasa.gov, you will get so much more information about things and beautiful space images that you can take and do everything from put on the desktop background of your computer to make your next big project with. So with that, I want to thank everyone for your attention today, and I think that we're ready for questions.
So I have a couple of questions here, and I think I could ask them in English, and if you like, you can respond in Russian or English. So maybe some of these questions were covered in the lecture, but still maybe you could broaden your answers. So first of all, a couple of little bit personal questions. How does one get to work at NASA? So what do you have to do to actually become an employee there?
Well, it's actually, I mean, for me, this is a good story that I didn't tell about, but I actually applied on LinkedIn to an ad for NASA. So I applied and then I waited, and it took about 6 months for them to get back to me. And they called me and were like, "Hey, do you want to come in for or you want a phone interview?" And I was like, "Who is this?" They're like, "NASA." And I was like, oh, okay. Yes, absolutely. It was my dream job. I applied for it, and it took a long time because things take a while sometimes. But that leads me to believe that anyone can really work at NASA if you want to. We have everything from an actual job for visual strategy, so people with a background in art, specifically to try to communicate science. Then, of course, we have, different loads of different scientists. So from geologists to climate scientists to, just you think of it, you can make it. And then engineering is also really important, specifically robotics. But I think that if you do have a background like me and you're able to communicate some of these complex problems, that there really is a place for you, because without communication and without that, you really don't, some of these things would be lost in translation. So I guess my short answer is, I think if you want to work at somewhere like NASA, you should apply. And if you have more specific questions, feel free to contact me and I can give you more details. JPL has a great job application website, actually. I believe it's jpl.nasa.gov/jobs. And we have internships that we offer every year. So it is really in the realm of possibility for anyone to get hired if they really want this job. Also, we're always looking for software interns. So in my lab. So if you are a software engineer or a designer, please apply.
Thank you, Sasha, for your openness with answers. This is really could be a great opportunity if you just dream a lot and dream enough. And the next question is actually about your team. How many people are working in your team, and how many people are working generally at Jet Propulsion Lab?
Okay, that's a good question. So on my team my whole lab has about, I would say, 30 people. I run the Protospace team. So I'm the project lead of that, and that's about 10 people total, including myself. Actually 11 right now. We have an academic part-time student working with us. So it's quite small, the operation. So our software projects are more long-formed. They take a while because there are fewer people, but fewer people with a lot of expertise. I mean, we have on that team specifically, for instance, a PhD that studied augmented reality. And so really on the cusp of this kind of research side. And within the developers, we have 3D development, we have web development, and the designers, we have user research designers and user interface designers. And we all kind of work together cross-collaboratively. For JPL, I know it's a big number. I know it's bigger when we have interns, but it's over 5,000 people. I don't want to, I think that's the last number that I heard. I might be off by 1,000, but it's a big company. I might actually be over 5,000 at this point. And so we both have people that work for JPL, which are government contractors. And then we actually have contractors that we contract as well. So you can get a job through a third-party contract agency as well. So it's a very, very big lab.
That's amazing. A big scale that you work, really. So could you just briefly navigate us through your main future projects of your lab and what we should follow next few months? Something that personally you and your team are doing?
Yeah, so I would say in the next few months, so the big focus right now is the Perseverance rover. So the team that I spoke of in the beginning that create Astro, their work is cut out for them to make sure that all of the communications from Mars happen nicely and we're able to visualize them to create communication between the scientists and the people that plan for what the rover is going to do. So that's an extremely important job, and the launch is in July. And so that's a big focus for this summer for our lab and for both the ops lab and for JPL. I think short term, the ventilator project is a huge part of JPL. So helping with that project however we can. And in terms of just interesting things, we did acquire some new, the HoloLens 2 came out, which has different capabilities. So we have been experimenting with interactivity. How can we make augmented reality feel more real? How can we make the fact that you can, in the HoloLens 2, now touch things feel more natural? And so we're doing a lot of research and design on that. Specifically, some designers are creating really amazing experiments for that. So those are the three big things, I think.
Cool, thank you. And talking about all this technology, could you describe the times that we are living it now as the times of the most intensive extraterrestrial exploration? For example, comparing with 60s or 70s or 80s of last century.
I mean, now is the time that we're finding more things than we've ever found, just even based on older technology. In terms of finding other life, I think the closest thing that JPL is doing, again, to mention the Perseverance rover, but as I said, that mission will actually take samples, cache them, so put them in the ground and leave them for a next mission to come pick them up and bring them back to Earth. So that will be the first time we have Martian soil on Earth. And that will be the first time we can actually test that soil in the way that we would here to see, are there any signs of life? Are there any, is there anything there? So that doesn't seem so far away as we're launching in July. It will take a while to get that second mission in there. And then we've also never taken off from Mars. So I see that from the robotic standpoint as a really big mission. But then we have astrophysics and we have all of these telescopes looking back and through time, basically, and seeing how exactly we formed, and that is incredible research. The data visualization of that is really, really just awe-inspiring. And we have things like SETI that are listening to things. So I think in our lifetime, we hopefully will be able to uncover more of this mystery of the universe. One of my favorite things that ever happened to me at work was sitting in a meeting with Dr. Ed Stone, who worked on Voyager. He is one of my heroes, basically, and we were screening a film about Voyager and the Golden Record, and he asked me what I thought about it, and I was like, "Are you sure you're asking me?" And so I asked him. I said, I gave my feedback on what we had watched, and then I said, do you think that Voyager 1, now that it's outside of our solar system, will ever find any life and that someone will be able to play the Golden Record? And he said, I don't think so, because there's so much space in space. So, but I said, but I think there's still a chance. And he said, that's something that Carl Sagan would say. So that made me very happy on many levels. But the coolest thing is that it is unpredictable, but we have so many intelligent guesses about how we formed, about how Mars formed, about our own solar system. So I only see that getting better and better as our technology and our spacecraft get more robust.
Great, thank you very much. You actually answered the next question: is there life on Mars? So
not sure.
No. What is your personal opinion?
My personal opinion, I would believe that since Mars and Earth, this is me speaking for myself, Mars and Earth formed at the same time, Mars formed so differently. We do have signs of former salty water on Mars. And I think, that's a sign of life or possible existing ancient life. And to find even more traces of that would be, I think, so fascinating. The reason that we're so interested in Mars, I think, as a species and as researchers, scientists, and engineers, is because it's so close to us. It's about a 6-month flight to get there. So we can really try and understand how we formed by seeing how Mars formed. We actually have a really nice mission up there called Onsite, which is not a rover, it is a lander. So it stays in one place, but it's understanding the inner workings of Mars. So it's looking at the core, it's looking at Mars quakes, which are earthquakes on Mars. And it's looking at a whole different spectrum of how the planet formed. So even through that mission, we're going to find out a lot more about ourselves and our universe.
Hope so.
I do too.
And what do you think generally? Is there a possibility of human settlements on the moon or just in the space? Are we there yet with our technologies, or we have to wait another decade?
Well, there is a moon mission that's happening, Artemis. So that is something that NASA has put on the forefront of their goals. And so I think within, a shorter period of time, I believe the range last said was 2024 to have lunar landing again. I think habitability is a possibility. I think there needs to be so much planning done for that. And I also think that in this day and age, that NASA and private industry for space, if we work together, I think we can get to that, specifically if we have goals that we can all agree on. So I think that's kind of where I stand on it. I wouldn't want to go to Mars. It's too far. I would be, I think, the most hyper astronaut. Just don't like confined spaces. But it's fascinating to me. I would love to have someone virtually show me Mars through a first-person view. And I think what astronauts do is incredible, and being able to work with them even a little bit, they're very special, kind of extremely smart, extremely well thought through people, and it's inspiring to talk to them and specifically know that they've been in space.
Right. We have a question here. You've mentioned art in relation to your work at NASA. What do you mean by that? And would you be interested, for example, in someone who does space illustrations?
Yes. Space illustrations are very important. We actually, both in a 3D format and in a 2D format. As I said, there are very talented people that have trained in art like me, but are actually working in the visual strategy part of JPL, communicating our story, communicating the history of it. So if you have an interest in illustration, and if you are interested in the idea of telling stories or helping us communicate, that is definitely a job that is it's respected and understood. I feel the same for design, because without creativity, you don't have great ideas, right? You kind of do the same thing over again. So I think with a discipline in art, and an understanding of how to ingest things and learn things, I think it's a very perfect combination for helping to communicate science and engineering.
Thank you for your answer. And one more question about job. You mentioned the internship, and could you tell a little bit more about it?
Yes, so there are a few caveats for international people, but I don't have to get to those right now. But we do have an internship program that we open very practical work up to students. So you have to be enlisted in university. I think it would be easier to not be international, I think, to our international applicants, but I can also answer those questions maybe online for those people that want details or links. So we bring on thousands of interns every year. In my lab, We usually have about 10 to 12 different people working actually on projects. So we give them real work. They are expected to be in the same processes as we are in terms of creating software. They're very much part of the team. So in the same way that I had got that practical work at the Field Museum when I was still a student, and then I got hired afterwards, we kind of used that same model. A lot of our full-time employees in the ops lab, for instance, were interns for at least a summer, or maybe more than that too. We also offer longer internships for 6 months, for instance. And if you're local, we also offer academic part-time work. So if your university allows, you can actually work part-time at JPL and then still attend university.
It's amazing. A little bit different question, and maybe the last one, if nothing more is coming. When do you think AR will be possible without distracting equipment?
So I think the least distracting equipment is your phone, and that's possible now. Whether that is what this person asking the question enjoys or not, I would actually love feedback on what they think about Spacecraft AR, for instance, because all you need is a phone to scan things. So that's why I think that platform is faster to take off in terms of dissemination to the public. The problem being still that a lot of the world still doesn't have a phone. So this is a question I constantly ask students: how can you think about VR or AR without equipment? Like, how do we actually think about it without needing a phone that costs a lot of money? So quick answer is the technology is already getting there. Actually, I just released an app with the visualization lead of Chandra X-ray Observatory, which is an awesome telescope looking at beautiful things. And Mandy Mandelstein, who's a filmmaker and creative person, and Kristen Devona, who helped design the app. It's called Reach Across the Stars, and it's an AR app looking at the history of women in space and in science and engineering and math. And you get to talk to an astronaut, and you get to kind of maybe see some of these figures specifically that you wouldn't see in your history book when you learn about science, technology, engineering, and math. And so I encourage you to check that out to see and give feedback. It's a beta release, so there are still bugs and things, so let us know. But I think if you start exploring, you'll see a lot of different forms of things available on your phone. It's really important to give feedback on how you think those actually help or hurt you in terms of learning something or an interaction. It's still very much a realm that's still being studied. And I don't think a time will come soon that there will be an AR headset that's super easy to use, but perhaps there will be a headset that easily ports to your phone, or they work together. So it's really on industry to create that, and for us to create feedback. I wish JPL could take time to create an augmented reality headset, but we are too busy with other things, unfortunately. Maybe one day we can.
Maybe with the help of those people who ask the questions.
Yeah, exactly. Please let me know.
So as far as we don't have any more questions, then thank you very much, Sasha. And I hope that people who watched us could reach you through all the social media here. They see it on the screen.
Absolutely.
And thank you very much for translation for Sasha Baich, and apologies for some inconvenience with the overlapping of sound sometimes. But still, it was a great pleasure to welcome Sasha Samochina at our Strelka virtual courtyard. And thank you very much for watching. You could see the full lecture afterwards on all our media and platforms. And please follow our future events at strelka.com. And just a round of virtual applause for Sasha. And
thank you so much. It's been so wonderful doing this. And one day we'll do it in real life once we can do that.
that would be amazing. So thank you everybody for watching, and have a great evening or day for you all.